The hopper, one of Minecraft's most influential additions when it comes to redstone, allowing for movement of items to and from containers, and farms with far less loss from item despawns. The hopper was added to the game in Snapshot 13W01A on January 3rd, 2013, and people very quickly realized just how useful they could be. One of the first creations using these hoppers can also be a challenge to understand. I am, of course, talking about the hopper item sorter. Just 2 days after the hopper's release, before the hopper even had the ability to lock, Seth Bling made, according to my research, the oldest item sorter using hoppers. Just 5 days later, on January 10th, 2013, the first one-block wide item sorter was made by Mr. Dr. Professor Pigman on the same day that the ability to lock hoppers was added to the game. The final significant revision to the item sorter, and the one that we will be rediscovering today, was made by Impulse SV on October 2nd, 2014. Now, not many designs last as long as this sorter has in Minecraft, whether that be because they use glitches or simply because the features change. But this sorter has lasted over 10 years because it only uses intended mechanics in its design. So, without further ado, let's find out how this design was created all those years ago. So, to begin, we're going to have to understand the basics of hoppers. If you already understand hoppers, jump to the timestamp on screen now. Otherwise, let's get right to it. This is a hopper. It was first added in the version 1.5. A hopper can be crafted like this, with 5 iron and a chest. So it's not the most expensive, but it can definitely be a challenge to get a lot of them early game. A hopper can point one of 5 directions, the 4 cardinal directions seen here, or straight down as we saw in the beginning. Hopper can take items either from the air or from another container, like this chest, and funnel them into another container. This other container could be something like, for example, another hopper, meaning we can chain hoppers like this. It's going through this one, into this one. This also means, of course, that we can have winding chains of hoppers like this, and it'll still make its way to our target chest. So now that we know the bare minimum about hoppers, let's get into some of their special traits. So if we go through this wall, and we'll get to our next part. Hoppers can be in one of 2 states. Either they're unlocked and run normally, as we just observed, or they can be locked by receiving any redstone power, like this redstone block, this torch, or even this barrel with some items in it. In this locked state, a hopper will not take any items from the air, nor will it be able to put items into containers. So, as you can see, we have this chest here, and this chest. And if we take this purple wool out of this barrel, then it'll flow normally. That is until we power this hopper, and now, as you can see, it's locked, and it's not putting items in. So let's look a little closer into how this locking works so we can fully understand its capability. So every time a hopper has to do what I'm calling an action, it will try to pull from containers, like this hopper pulling from this chest, or this hopper pulling from this other hopper, and it'll also try to push 2 containers, like this hopper pushing to this chest, and this hopper pushing to this hopper. And it pushes in the same direction of its funnel. So as you can see, it's got this little thing at the end here, that's the direction it'll push to. So let's look at a diagram of how this pushing and pulling works with the locking. So here, I have this same build, as you can see, but it's marked with these arrows. Red means that a hopper is pulling from whichever container. Blue means a hopper is pushing to whichever container. And when hoppers are pulling and pushing to and from each other, will be marked in purple. So this diagram will show exactly what's happening over here. So at the moment, this hopper will pull from the chest because this chest is helpless to do anything on its own. It doesn't know how to push or pull. And then it will push to this hopper, and this hopper will cooperate by pulling. And then this hopper will push to this chest, which is also helpless because it can't do anything. So let's see if this is how it works right now. So as you can see, it's not showing up in this hopper because it's getting immediately pulled by this one, and then it's all funneling into this chest. So that's working at the moment, but let's see what happens when it's locked. So let's lock it here, and similarly, let's lock the diagram right here. As you can see, things change. So let's see if we can figure out what's happening here based on just this diagram. So this hopper is going to try to pull from this chest, and it'll do it successfully, not like this hopper is locked. And then you'll notice that this is changed from purple to blue, because now this hopper can't do its pushing or pulling, so it needs this hopper to push into it instead of being able to pull. And then this chest doesn't get any items because, well, this hopper can't push to it anymore. So let's see if this is correct by putting some items in this top chest. So, based on this diagram, they should flow into this hopper just fine, and into this hopper, but then should not go into the chest. So they're going in, and they're going in here, but they're not going into the chest, just like we predicted. So, now we can actually move on to the sorting design, now that we have this more in-depth knowledge of how the hoppers work. Let's get into the trial and error of actually making the design. A first naive approach might just be to put some items in this hopper and then unlock it when it has too many items. That is to say, it has a high enough signal strength. This does appear to work. If we put in more than 22 items, then it does drain out. But the issue comes from the fact that this hopper is locked, which means that it can't take from this chest. From here, the next most obvious thing to do is just to add another hopper as a middleman. So it'll pull from this chest and then push to this hopper when it's locked. So let's try that. Let's put some lime wool in this hopper. I believe 22 was our magic number. And then if we put some lime wool in this chest, it does correctly get through to the bottom. But the issue comes from if we have a contaminant like this black concrete here. If I merely swap out the lime wool and put in black concrete in this first slot, then suddenly the black concrete flows in and it starts draining out the extra lime wool. So we need to fix out the issue of it flushing out the extra. There's a simple fix to this problem. We just fill the rest of the slots with the item that we want. So we put in here 4, and that means that we need 18 in the slot. And this prevents this black concrete from ever getting into this hopper to make it flood out the blue wool. But then the issue is kind of just moved up to this hopper, where it gets clogged. What we need to be able to do is stop this hopper from taking in items. We can do this quite simply by just moving the filter up, but doing it just like this would have the same problems as our first design. So what we have to do is move the locking down to this hopper. That way, when this hopper has too few items, it'll lock this one, which stops it from pulling. And then, importantly, this one also has to face out so it doesn't push to this hopper. Let's see if this works. Let's take our pink wool, fill it up with our 18 and then the 4 extra slots. And then, if we put in our pink wool, it correctly drains out. But the issue here is that our torch is turning on and off quite rapidly, which causes it to burn out. And this will unlock our hopper for a while, which causes issues when we have extra items. As you can see, now our filter is draining out yet again. This problem can be quite easily fixed by just adding a repeater, which will kind of filter out the noise. So if we have this red wool, for instance, we need to put in our filter first. And as you can see, when we have our 18, it no longer turns this torch on and off rapidly, because even though this is turning on and off, it's at a rate fast enough to where this torch doesn't even notice, and it just stays off. Until, of course, we go through all of our red wool, and then our filter will stop. So this is almost perfect, except for the fact that if we remove this chest, we get a big issue. Dropping this whole stack causes it to flow into other slots, which means that they will be drained out and our filter is susceptible to contaminants yet again. We need a way to prevent this hopper from getting more items than it should. And this is quite an interesting way of doing it. What we can do is we can have 4 named items as our extras, and then our main item right there, as it is normally. these named items won't get picked up by the system, so just have the excess rest on top, as you can see, until it can take enough in where it won't drain them fully out. So this is really close to a perfect design. Of course, we still need to make it one wide, but in order to make it one wide, we'll need to understand some things about repeaters. So if we go through here, we can see some interesting properties about them. They can take a redstone signal from above, as you can see with this redstone block. They can do it even if there's a block in the way, as you can see here, and they can even do it while changing directions. This will be especially useful for our one block wide design. So without further ado, let's get into that said design. Here is a kind of different version of the one-wide design made by Mr. Dr. Professor Pigman all those years ago. He had the comparator in a different spot, but this is quite a compact design, as you can tell. This comparator is doing the same thing as our comparator earlier was. It's just reading the state of the hopper, and then when it gets to a signal strength of 2, we need that to go into a repeater, and that repeater to go into a torch, which we have exactly here. This comparator goes through this block, and it has 2 redstone to take its signal strength down, and then this repeater will read it and power this torch, which powers this block, which locks the hopper. So let's see this design in action with our 4 filter items and some white wool. So if we put in our filter items, 18 white wool, and these 4 buttons, and then we drop all of this white wool in there, as you can see, it gets drained out, and it works exactly the same as our other design. They filter out, and they get into this chest. Now, the issue with this design isn't quite as obvious, but it's because it only shows up when you tile it. And if we have this stack of oak logs, then if I drop this, you might be able to see the issue. This goes to a signal strength of 3, which means that this one gets powered as well when it's not supposed to, which causes it, of course, to drain out its filter items like we had earlier. So the way this was fixed was by Impulse SV all those years ago, and the design is so elegant that while I explain it, I'll be building it in survival mode. So let's get our items, and let's do this. This design is really quite similar to the previous design, except for the fact that it takes a signal strength of 3 instead of 2 to trigger the unlocking. This prevents the issues that we saw before because it means that the signal strength can't bleed over, right? Because the issue was with this design that if it got to a signal strength of 3, which is the highest that can happen with 4 of these filter items, then it would bleed over here. So now that it takes a signal strength of 3 to trigger it, it'll prevent that issue because, like I just said, the highest that this can ever get to with these 4 extra items is a signal strength of 3. Now the previous design does work fine if you're just doing a hopper trail, but it falls apart when you need to drop items. So just a chest like this actually is unnecessary in our system. But if I drop this stack, you can see that we now correctly filter through, and this design won't trigger any others because this is a signal strength of 1, so if you imagine another one here, then it won't trigger it. And this is the exact design that Impulse SV made, though he was filtering different types of stones in his original video. And there it is. A simple, thin design that's lasted all those years. So, here's our final design. A simple, and most importantly, clever design. Though, the thinking behind it was not done alone. This was a collaborative effort between clever redstoners like you, so who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to help create that one new design that'll last a very, very long time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed.